Well, a very devastating set of reports came out of Melbourne this week with regards to childcare centres and sexual abuse claims across a very wide number of centres, across a very wide time frame. And, just absolutely devastating for all the people impacted. And I don't want to spend too much talking about that because it's just so serious and so tragic. But I want to talk about this in the context of board directors and governance and risk management. Too often I think people get trapped into the thinking of, well, this is the way we've always done it. We've always done our police checks. We've always done our blue cards. Tick, tick, tick on the risk registry. We're doing everything right. But you really always have to look at risk through a new lens. Evolving risks, changing environments, changing issues, and constantly looking at things with a fresh pair of eyes because you just don't want these things happening on your watch. And, in the case of the childcare centres, I think we'll see some form of a commission or maybe even a royal commission coming into the sector because the issues are not just isolated to what we've seen in the press in recent times. We will see some sort of mandate or regulatory change around who can have access to children, who can be alone with children, whether the whole concept of having a single individual alone with a child or a baby is acceptable. And you have in these environments ratio issues, childcare providers to children numbers, and so on. But you've got to look at things with a fresh pair of eyes. And, for many, many years, many very high profile politicians and individuals in the community have been advocating for, registries to track, people who have issues from a pedophilia perspective. And, everything has been very, very slow to come to pass. But that does not mean that as a board director, you can afford to wait for the legislation to change. You need to be ahead of, the issues in your business. You need to be across and preempting what could become a major, major problem. I have for many years advised clients to avoid serving as a board director in the childcare centre industry because of this exact issue that has now transpired, because I certainly wouldn't want something like this happening on my watch. Now, if I was going to go in as a board director, I would be wanting to very carefully look at the systems, the processes around the recruitment of individuals that come into the sector and not just rely on the stock standard police checks and the blue card. And then I would be looking at the systems and the processes that protect children when they are under your care. So I think it's a big wake up call, not just about this industry, but all industries. I was talking to a client the other day. She was a very wealthy individual. They own transport logistics companies. And, there's a lot of risk in transport, in logistics. When you're dealing with, heavy equipment, you're dealing with drivers, you're dealing with a lot of, volatility, safety issues all the time. You can't take your eye off the wheel, so to speak. As a board director, you have to be constantly looking at the issues. And just because the industry says, well, drivers shouldn't drive for more than 8 hours at a time, or whatever the mandates are, or whatever the legislation says, does that necessarily mean that you just go to lowest common denominator as a board? No, you've got to be thinking about the best practice way you can run your businesses, the way you can balance risk with operational concerns and issues. So I think it's a big wake-up call for risk professionals in all sectors. I think it's a big wake-up call for board directors. And I'd be really interested in risk professionals adding in their insights to my video here because I'd really like to get your commentary on what is now considered best practice from a risk management perspective. Because I think a lot of board directors that I meet with and I'm counseling in a very, very old-fashioned, simplistic approach to risk management frameworks. And they're looking at it from the perspective of a risk registry and, color coded. And I mean, this is really basic stuff. I think we've got to be looking at risk in a different way, through a different lens, through a 3D, a 5D lens. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for improvement here. So, something for you to consider yourself, just where you are on the spectrum of your knowledge of risk management frameworks and how you are operating in your own businesses, and what are the things that keep you awake at night, and what do you need to now go into your next board meeting and do to make a real impact and a real difference in that boardroom setting.